Good evening, workshoppers. It's back to the bi-monthly episodes here. We've had a little bit of a slowdown. We had some rapid fire news that was going through and hitting us, last month. We're kind of back to the more of the usual scheme of things, but that isn't to say that we don't have a lot of things to go through and talk about here on episode 194. Bounties, books, buffs, and Baal. I had to glance over at the actual title there in order to make sure that I wasn't going to screw that up and have to re-record the opening. Yeah. I guess to start things off, because I know some people have been asking about it, via email or on YouTube, that, I had a growth that was on my nose. I finally went through and got that taken a look at, and we just got the biopsy results back in this week. It's a basal cell. Basically one of the least aggressive forms and one of the most common forms of like skin cancer that's out there. The biopsy did come back non-aggressive, so there's virtually no chance that it spread anywhere else. And now it's just having to go in, get some surgery to take out what's growing underneath the skin. They actually, when they said that they were going to do a biopsy, I didn't actually expect them to take part of my nose off. So it's a pretty sizable chunk that's going through and missing there from the skin. Hence the band-aid. Had the pressure bandage on there, for quite a bit immediately following the procedure because it just did not want to stop bleeding. Yeah, here we are. We're all set. I have surgery scheduled for 9/11. That's not ominous at all, right? That's a good sign, because the other date that they offered me was actually my birthday, and so that one was just weird that it's like those are my two dates, the 27th or the 11th, and so I ended up going and opting for September, since I don't want to be going into surgery for my birthday. That seems like, I guess, here's your health. That's a great birthday gift, I guess you could say. But yeah, not really anything to go and worry about or anything like that. The only thing, and I said this on Twitter, the only thing that the surgeon is concerned about is scarring, because they never quite know how large the carcinoma is until they actually get in there and start slowly cutting away like the layers of skin and such that are affected by the cancer cells. So it could just be restricted to that one area. It could be massive underneath the skin, and you could never tell. So scarring is pretty much the only thing that they're concerned about, and then that means like maybe a plastic surgeon or something like that, and then it starts getting expensive, and well, we'll see where things go from there. But everything is good. It's going to be taken care of, and there's really no major health risks or anything like that that's involved. And the best part is when they do the surgery, since it's like right there on my nose, I can't help but watch it the entire time, because it's just a local anesthetic. They don't put you under for that type of thing. It's like it's a couple hours, because they go and they cut out a little bit and then check it. Is there still cancer cells here? Yes. Cut out a little bit more. Is there still cells? Cut out a little bit more, and you go on for that. So it's like 2 to 4 hours. I will just sit there and watch my nose get cut away the entire time. Fun stuff. But to actually go and talk about some Diablo news, we have like I said, we've got quite a few things to go and talk about. Obviously, there's some like a little minor seasonal addition, not so much a seasonal buff, but like a little addition that we had for the remainder of season 21, with the Goblin. There's some issues over on the EU side. I want to talk a little bit about the Sin War trilogy that I've been going and rereading in a project that I'm working on, to go and like read through all of the Diablo novels again. Some of my thoughts on where what we could potentially look forward to with the next season of Diablo 3. And then finally, we had a lot of Diablo Immortal updates, of course, immediately following the day after I recorded episode 193, talking about all the rumors and stuff that would potentially be coming for Diablo Immortal. And we got some news, some interesting things to go and talk about. And of course, I know there's some of you that don't particularly care about Diablo Immortal. So it's something that I'm still interested in, but I'll save that for the tail end of the episode. and kind of go and cover all the rest of the topics before that. So yeah, we now have, this was starting from the other day, so by the time that you're listening to this episode, there is now the double bounty buff has been implemented for the remainder of season 21. We don't have an end date for season 21 yet, but you can go and farm bounties to your heart's content in order to go and get yourself your full set of primals for your 150 pushes. Rip to all of those that have already gone and done like their seasonal goal of getting a solo 150 and have ended it there with how many bounties you all must have run in order to go and accomplish that. Speaking of which, Wudijo uploaded, or Wudijo? God, I'm terrible with names. But Woody went and was posted a video with his rank 1 150 clear on his Demon Hunter. And it's a really cool video. I'll link it here in chat, and then of course I'll link it down below for the in the YouTube section as well. But it is it's a pretty cool and interesting take on seeing a high-end player go tackle the game and how they use and make the seasonal buff work for them in order to get these high-end clears. And if you don't know who Woody, he is like one of the best Diablo 3 players in the world. He is known for being one of the premier Demon Hunter theory crafters. That took a little bit of a break from content creation for D3, but when they announced that they were making a new set for Demon Hunter, he couldn't help himself and so came back in order to go and give it a look. And he talks about a little bit like the insane amount, like almost 300 hours that went into the preparation, and then the execution in order to try and get that solo 150 clear. You're talking over 5,000 keys in attempts in order to fish for that 150 in only 40 spawns of the Rift Guardian in total. Out of those like 5,000 keys, a lot of them are just going to be like you zone in, you see level 1, it's trash, and so just instantly pop back out, create a new game. Other times you have to get a little bit farther, and so it was like I believe it was like 130-ish hours of attempts that he put into trying to get that clear. So when you see that people go through and do these 150 clears solo, even with the seasonal buff, it's not an easy thing to do. It's very time consuming. It's a lot of fishing. It requires a lot of determination and a lot of effort, and quite a bit of luck. There's definitely quite a bit of luck that's involved there as well. But so by all means go through, check out that video if you're watching live. Maybe wait till the episode's over to check it out, but otherwise I highly recommend going through, seeing that and what goes into like those high level clears. But it also is interesting, like going and taking a look at the leaderboards where a lot of the classes do have 150 clears already. We're just a little over a month into the season, and we still have half of the season left to go, if not a little bit more, in order to go and continue to get those clears. I know my play just these past couple of weeks, because of the whole thing with the nose and the doctor's visit and stuff, I haven't been putting as much time in these last couple of seasons, but I would like still to try and at least, my minor goal is to push like a 120. We'll see where that goes. But it's still plenty of time left to go through, get your seasonal goals in, and we'll probably eventually see like a 150 for almost all of the classes, because I think like the lowest is tied for the Wizard and the Monk at like a 143, but that could also be just some of those people aren't really pushing. They're not trying to push a 144 or a 145, that they're straight up just pushing a 150. And you can see we're a very powerful class, like a Demon Hunter takes like 130 hours to go and do so, that on a less powerful class such as a Wizard is struggling a little bit more in order to get that. But with the bonuses that you get from the seasonal buff, a little bit of luck can take you a very long way. And then other extremely powerful classes such as the Crusader and the Witch Doctor are already going and clearing through it, and you've got the Barbarian and the Necro that are closing in on that 150. So there's I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season, just through the additional Paragon, now that you have the bounty bonus, which what the high-end players use the bounty mats for is you're using this time, usually in a season that doesn't have one of these like super overpowered buffs such as season 21, is that you're using those first kind of 2 months just to farm Paragon. It's all experience farming. You're leveling gems, you're getting like multiple sets of full like 150 augments, or as high as you can get, set and ready, and you're spending mats and blood shards in order to go through and get your equipment, as well as dedicating a lot of time to farming bounties, getting a ton of bounty mats, so that way when you're ready to go and do your push, the pieces that after like the end of those 2 months or whatever time frame that you give yourself, anything that you don't yet have as a perfect primal, you then use your bounty mats to go and re-roll as good of a primal as you're possibly going to get. So thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of bounty mats will be going and spent into just re-rolling your weapon, every piece of gear that you have, and to get it as perfect as possible stats that you can. Put your full 150 augments on that set of gear, and then now you're in fishing mode. You're going through your fishing, trying to get that highest possible clear that you can, for the end of the season, and you're just trying to get that perfect rift, that perfect combination, and then of course having a decent Rift Guardian spawn after you get that good rift. So that way you can kill it and push on. This season has that added caveat of also having decent RNG on your Trial of Tempest procs, so that way you're not going to end up getting the snowball or the fire wave right when you proc the Rift Guardian, and is basically, well, that's the end of the run right there. And so that's with the double bounty bonus is going to help those higher end players get that gear faster. So maybe they don't have to spend as much time experience grinding, and they can cut that window off and dedicate a little bit more time towards fishing. And then for the more casual players, it's just nice, in order to go and get a lot of those bounty mats, because we're not going to be spending hundreds and hundreds of hours just farming Paragon, of having that chance to get the primal gear and such. The more dedicated high-end players are going to go and do. And so like I'm using those bounty mats in order to re-roll my gear already, because I don't expect to be putting in another couple hundred hours towards the rest of the season to push where I'm going to go. So I'm fine with using those mats and getting it now, and running the risk that I might potentially find an upgrade or a better piece a couple weeks in. It is kind of like one of those ones where is the difference between how people approach the game from a casual point of view and the more competitive high-end point of view. And that does also kind of lead me into like one final point for Diablo 3 is kind of like, where do we go from here? All the classes have their sets, but the wizard is obviously struggling quite a bit. They're kind of propped up by the power of the seasonal bonus, so some of the data, some of the numbers are always going to be skewed. But the wizard, with a lot of the changes, they don't really have a role in groups. They are struggling as far as the solo clears go. That I wouldn't be surprised that going into season 22, we see the devs tackle and do some updates for the wizard, to try and get them up to a level that's a little bit more competitive. Monks are in kind of like a similar instance, though as always it's one of those kind of like, where do you go with it, because monks do still have a place in the end game. They're still an amazing support class that gets pulled into all of your like 3 and 4 man groups, and but their solo performance is a little bit less. There's still also, once you have the Paragon or the gear for it, one of the fastest rift clearers, one of the fastest bounty clearers. I think they're without a doubt the best bounty build. But you just need a couple thousand Paragon levels in order to get the damage to the point that you can run it on Torment 16. So there's definitely a lot of give and take there, and if you buff them a little bit too much, it might, then you might have the instance where, what was it? I'm trying to remember the season. Was it season 19 where it's like, you had a support barbarian and then like 2 DPS barbarians. It's you don't really want those issues where you're just taking multiples of the same class into a single rift. Not that isn't currently happening a lot right now, but it's a goal, right? Hashtag goals. And then I guess to kind of round out the last of the Diablo 3 news, there has been apparently some issues going over on the EU servers with the bounty buff kind of dropping. From games, or you load into a game and the bounty buff isn't there. That has since been fixed, by the time that I'm recording this episode, that they fixed and handled that issue. And this is one of those ones where it's like, I think I understand like one of the issues that happened, and that was from a lightning talk that they did at BlizzCon a couple years ago, where Diablo uses like an A/B server setup, and so they'll implement a patch on one set of servers, so that way people can go and not be interrupted or kicked off when they implement a patch or an update, and so that they're just playing on server B that's running the older version, and server A is running the newer version. And then as you like log out and log back into the game, then you applies the patch, and it moves you over to server A until they get to the point where they finally just push the update to server B. Maybe they do have to kick people off or whatever, but it's like one of those ones where it helps with more of a seamless transition as people patch into the game. And it seems something might have happened where like that secondary server never like fully implemented the buff, and so they weren't getting the double bounty mats. And then also there's some issues with clears not registering. I don't know if this is only EU or if it's also affecting NA as well, but some people are their actual Greater Rift clears aren't being registered on the leaderboards, and hopefully that data is being saved, and so that way if people are pushing those high-end Greater Rifts, that they are getting credit for it eventually, whenever that fix is implemented for those things. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been going and reading through the Sin War trilogy. I've been wanting to go and reread all of the Diablo novels for a while. I figured Sin War trilogy was a good place to start. I think that the story that takes place there is going to have some more ramifications for Diablo 4 than any of the other novels that are out there. And also, it is my least favorite of the Diablo novels, and so I figured starting there would be a good point, because it only gets better, right? And it's been rough. I've talked about this on the after show. We had a nice good discussion on the last episode afterwards, but yeah, it's the Sin War trilogy. The novels themselves definitely feel rushed. They're all written by Richard Knack, and it's not the level of quality that I've associated with him, because he's also written some of my favorite Diablo novels as well. New York Times bestselling author, and there's just a lot of editorial issues and pacing issues that are taking place in the novels. I've started book 3 now, and it's gotten tremendously better in terms of just like the editing and like just kind of like the tone in the book. But it also, one of the other problems is not even besides that, is just like the main character Uldyssian is just not a good character. He just you don't like him. He's at the same time he's arrogant, but not you know, it's like he tries to sell himself as just this gentle, like, kind farmer that doesn't want fame or anything like that. But then immediately, like, a switch goes off in his head, and only he knows best, and his word is law, and we all have to follow what he does, and his, you know, a tendency to want to run away from all of his responsibilities, and every single time he does it, things always go horrible, yet he continues to do it. I think even, like, in the first book, like, he just, you know, like, runs away like at least like 3 times like in the course of the novel, and it's the same exact thing that happens each time. Like, how many times we're gonna use this trope? Yeah, because this is bad. And then it continues to do it in the second book too. And so it's a rough read, but I'm getting through there. And this kind of all ties into just a thought that I had, that when the Sin War trilogy was written, there was really no lore that had been established about what the World Stone was. And this, set of novels were to establish the Nephilim, were to establish how Sanctuary is created, the relationship between angels and demons, and what exactly the World Stone was. And out of all of that, only the concept of the Nephilim was carried over into Diablo 3. And that doesn't really seem like that big of a deal, but the part of the context that's missing from there is when these novels were coming out, I think it was 2005 to 2007, or it might have been 2006 to 2008, I forget. I had to look at the publishing dates on those books again. At BlizzCon, they've now, 2008, they announced Diablo 3, and they kind of, Chris Metzen, during some of the Diablo lore panels, is kind of like basically acknowledging that the Sin War is kind of a lore tie-in to the story for Diablo 3 to help set up these concepts, and focused a lot of time talking about the World Stone, and, what exactly the World Stone was, its place in the universe and all of that. And then, the talk about the World Stone kind of stops, and then we have Diablo 3, and there's no mention of the World Stone at all until we get a little bit of a teaser line at the end of Reaper of Souls. But I think that there is a much different story that was originally written for Diablo 3 and where they wanted to go with it, probably going back to the original story concepts that they had at Blizzard North, when this story would have been pitched. Would have been as Blizzard North is kind of getting ready to shut down and is wrapping up their aspect of production on Diablo 3 and such, and then this story is getting sent off in order to be written by an outside author as a tie-in to Diablo 3, even though people don't know it when the books are originally coming out. And there's just some interesting story hooks that are there that I feel are now beginning to get explored. Diablo Immortal is, of course, going to be centered around a lot about the World Stone, the corrupted shards, with Baal. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the Immortal section. But there's a big part, that's refocusing on the World Stone, and you can't really talk about the story of Lilith or Inarius without talking about the World Stone. The three of them are just interlinked completely. Everywhere that they've kind of existed, that's not been retconned, because Inarius is talked about in Diablo 1, where his skin is being pulled out and stretched, but angels don't have skin. In Diablo 2, Lilith was the mother of Andariel, and that's been retconned, and Dariel is one of the great evils. Tathamet would be the closest thing to her mother, and Lilith is now the daughter of Mephisto, so actually sits a peg lower than what Andariel would. So there's some things that that these characters were mentioned before, but the way that they've been codified in the lore, which I expect that there is going to be some changes, because even Lilith's depiction in the Sin War trilogy has changed completely. Inarius's, however, is still the same. If you look at the little portrait for Inarius in Diablo 3 with his little lore entry, it looks like he has flowing hair. But in the novels, I had completely forgotten about. It's actually supposed to be like tendrils of light, akin to what the wings are, that makes it look like he has silver hair, kind of coming out off of his hood. And so there's some things that they're picking up, some things that they might be changing. But I really think that the World Stone is going to come back into play in the story. Immortal is a given, but in Diablo 4, I think that there's going to be some stuff that's going to talk about the World Stone in Inarius, but just by the fact that Lilith is in it. So it's going to have to be an aspect of that story. And there were some other interesting things that I had completely forgotten about in the novel, going through and talking about. Kind of it mentions a little bit of the afterlife, where like human or Nephilim souls go to when they die. This Tragol and Rathma refer to it as after death, and that's actually where Mindilin had to go to in order to get his power to become the necromancer and craft his dagger that allows him to have access to like the death magic and to speak and control souls and such. And then also there was another part where kind of like the concept of ley lines that I had also forgotten about, where Lilith attempts to do a ritual at this old temple that's basically like older than time, because it's a temple that was created by the Nephilim at a very powerful, or not created by the Nephilim, it was created by the renegades, the angels and demons, when they were going through and creating Sanctuary, because it appears that the creation of Sanctuary was something that was almost akin to building a building. I probably could have phrased that better, but it's they refer to these ley lines that exist throughout Sanctuary that were kind of the actual foundation as the renegades were crafting the world. They're obviously, the World Stone is being used to go and create it, but there was these points of power that existed that they kind of anchored in reality, across the planet itself, and that kind of makes me think, is that something that has a tie-in to Lilith's summoning in the opening cinematic that we saw at BlizzCon? The by three they come. It would make a lot of sense, because that's also one of the other things that they mentioned in the book, is that the original headquarters for the Church of the Triune, which we know that the summoner, Magnus, or Rathma, if you would, the pale cultist from that video, is a member of the Triune. They told us that at BlizzCon. That the original headquarters of the Triune was also built at one of these ley line locations. That was a very place of great power with ties back to the World Stone. It wouldn't surprise me if where the gate that was used to summon Lilith back is another one of these points. So it's a small it's a deserted town, an abandoned church, and this very powerful summoning portal that's located underneath it. I do wonder, because I talked about this in previous episodes, where for a brief period of time Lilith was in control of the Triune, and she's one of those ones that, especially in the books, is referred to as being extremely cunning and always having contingencies and plans within plans. I would think that she would at least have enough foresight to have a potential safety net, that if she was ever banished again, to have a place created to resummon her. And if the Triune's involved, it could very well be that while she was, running the Triune for... The time in the novels is kind of wonky. It seems that it probably was over the course of a couple months, maybe even, close to at least... I guess maybe not a year, because it doesn't really have season changes, but they're in a jungle. But it could very well be a great period of time that she could have at least started this in some small little place, in some remote region of Kyrgyzstan that no one ever is going to think or check for, where they go and they build this place of power. And without, the cultists themselves, the members of the Triune, don't even really have to understand what it is that they're doing, just that they're following Lilith's plan. It seems to be something that would be very in character with her. And then also another thing that I had forgotten going and reading these novels is just how nefarious Inarius is himself. And it's something that kind of confuses in the main characters, like your cast of heroes, because anything that Lilith is involved in, she leaves a trail. Demons, they can try to mask like their scent, their essence or their corrupting touch, but wherever they go, they leave signs. And it's something that it might be hard to detect, but at least is still there, and that they can try. And even just no matter like how powerful or how well Lilith tries to disguise herself, the telltale clues that mark, like her passing and her corruption are always there if you know where to look for them. But there is no such marker for angels. And for as cunning and as twisted and as conniving as Lilith is, Inarius is more. And so as soon as Inarius had learned that Lilith had come back and was trying to go through and, create the army of the Nephilim, he began to guide her in her efforts, and was basically the orchestrator of the entire thing. And not only did she, Odyssean, the main character, and others were basically following along, to the march of Lilith's tune, even when they were trying to fight against her. But that entire time, Lilith didn't even realize that she was just enacting Inarius's plan, and that he is far more, conniving and scheming and dangerous in that aspect than even Lilith was. And then the fact that you can never tell whether an angel was involved because they don't leave any telltale clues or lingering corruption to their presence is even more sinister, because you never really can tell. But it is a very interesting thing where everything is kind of playing out as exactly as Inarius has seen it. And that, he is such a long-term planner and plotter that no one really has any idea, that he's actually the one that's pulling all of the strings. He orchestrated, as soon as he found out what Lilith was doing, he was able to go through and enable things so that way, Lucian, Lilith's brother, Mephisto's son, who was the original leader of the Triune, was kind of manipulated into acting directly against Odyssean. And then Lucian was killed, so that way Lilith could take control of the Triune to now act directly against Odyssean. So that way Inarius was manipulating the Nephilim, the Edrim, to basically directly destroy the Triune without Inarius having to get his hands dirty. And then once the Triune was destroyed, the three were defeated, he could just waltz in, kill all the budding Nephilim, and then manipulate the World Stone to make sure that he undid any of the changes that Lilith had made that allowed their powers to come back, and basically have everything go back to normal as he saw fit, or barring that, just completely destroy the world and start over from scratch. And it was just the way that he is manipulating everything from behind the scenes makes me have a potential theory about Diablo 4, and that's, what if Inarius is the one that summoned Lilith? What if he's again, using his former lover as a tool with which to enact his own, plots, his own revenge? Because everybody's on Inarius's shortlist now. This is someone who's spent, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of potentially millions of years. We have no idea how long Sanctuary has existed. And Inarius was in seclusion for most of it, basking in his own glory. He definitely is like the Archangel of Vanity. And, everyone has basically pissed off Inarius because they dare question him. the Nephilim for existing are that's a mark against them, and then the fact that they dare challenged him, not just once during the Sin War, they challenged him during the Scouring, during when the firstborn Nephilim, where he basically enacted genocide for anybody that dared question his authority, or that the fact that he went to the Nephilim and said, "I'm taking away all of your powers, live with it." Anyone that questioned it, he killed. And then, during the Sin War again, when he was losing control of the situation, he tried to do it again to just kill off all of humanity. And, well, you all were a mistake. I'm going to start over. He turned his back on heaven because he felt that they didn't, they couldn't see past their own petty squabbles and their own little war. And then the forces of heaven gave him up, where he's been tortured for the last 3,000 years. He's probably not a fan. He's still an angel. He hates demons. He probably blames the three, Baal, Mephisto, and Diablo, for escalating the Sin War that actually got the attention of the high heavens, that caused him to lose control of Sanctuary. Inarius has reasons to hate everybody, anyone. And so what better way for him to go through and get revenge than to potentially find some way of, I don't know, pulling the World Stone back together, or using the power of the Nephilim or something along those lines, in order to strike back and get revenge on everyone. If for nothing else, then definitely he hates the humanity and the Nephilim more so than probably anybody else. Everybody thinks that Imperius is a jerk. Well, you haven't seen Inarius's take on humanity. Imagine Mephisto. Mephisto hasn't been present for at least like about 350-ish years, since the Dark Exile. When Mephisto was banished from Hell, we don't know who took over his place in Hell while the rest of the lesser evils were going through and fighting over it. The civil war in Hell basically wasn't resolved until almost right before the events of Diablo 3, with Asmodean finally beating Belial. And that was, of course, Asmodean's reign was kind of relatively short-lived before he too was killed. We don't know what the time difference is between Diablo 3 and Diablo 4, but during that point in time, there very well could be none of the great evils alive or present at that point. And so who's acting as Inarius's jailer? Could he have broken free from some time before and began to manipulate the events leading up to Diablo 4 with the resummoning of Lilith to try and maybe do something with the lost fragments or shards of the World Stone? Or maybe he got wind of what Malthael's plan was and decided that he could do something akin to that himself, gorge on the power of the Nephilim in order to make him a greater being, to go toe-to-toe with the descendants of Odyssean. I don't know. It was a random a random little thought that I might have had. You just given how tricky he is, and also just how powerful he is. Without some of the greater demons there with which to watch over and ensure that he remains imprisoned. He very well could have broken out. There's hundreds of years of basically not really having anybody to watch over him. While he languishes in those dungeons, Mephisto's, dungeons in the prison of, mirrors and such. That's kind of been, I don't know, it probably would still be, but somewhat retconned. Because it doesn't have flesh to distort anymore, with chains and hooks and stuff. But, yeah, I'm really hoping that at some point that we get a bit more of a story primer for Diablo 4, at least an idea of how long has passed, how much time has passed since Diablo 3 to Diablo 4, and any of the events that have taken place, in that interim. Because with Diablo Immortal, we know that there's a 20-year period of time between 2 and 3. Immortal takes place about 5 years after Diablo 2. And that there's a lot of apparently really big things that happened in that time frame that they'll go through and discuss throughout the game. We have some hints at it, and I'll talk about that as a segueing into discussing about Immortal. Uh, but such as even just like the simple thing of Baal returning, and one of the key kind of like story hooks is that like the minions of hell are looking to try and use these corrupted shattered fragments of the world stone with which to resummon or resurrect their demonic leaders faster. Skarn, one of the chief lieutenants of Diablo, is hoping to get these shards of the world stone so that way he can quickly resurrect Diablo. And it's it's that could something similar have happened between the events in 3 and 4? It's possible, could happen, and I look forward to learning more over the course of the next years until we have the launch of D4. But I guess kind of going through and getting towards the end of the episode here, I of course in episode 193 spent a lot of time going and talking about the rumors and things that were surrounding Diablo Immortal, and well, then of course shortly thereafter we had a pretty big kind of news break in regards to Immortal. It's both an update and it's not, and it involves mostly an update that came to the Chinese website. And there was a couple new gameplay trailers and things of that nature. But one of the big ones is they had some new character models that they went and showed off. And I've been having the website up here for about an hour and a half now. I hope that the videos have loaded. It's an incredibly slow loading time, but nope, they didn't fully load yet. But like, we have the Barbarian here. That this is very different from kind of like the loading screen that you get for the Barbarian on the English versions of the website. The Wizard is also similar but different. Crusader isn't loading, Demon Hunter isn't loading, and the Necromancer isn't loading, and the Monk loads about half a second. So like I said, these videos, even though they just run, they're like little JavaScripts that load in the background. They're very, very slow to load. But like on you can kind of see the Barbarian there, as opposed to this Barbarian. Very, very different. Obviously, a lot more Asian looking than the classic Barbarian, and it's one of those things that's kind of like been discussed since we had those little intro updates. Is this like a customization option, or are these more region specific skins? And because you can see that it even though the North American website had an older version of the trailer, I was able to go and pull a clip from a live stream at BlizzCon 2019 that the trailer that you saw there on the Chinese website is exactly the same, except that the heads are different. And the lower resolution on the the classic Barbarian is because, again, I'm pulling it from a clip from a live stream, as opposed to just taking a screenshot directly from the source video. But the Demon Hunter, the Barbarian, the Wizard, and the Monk were playable at the last year's BlizzCon, and those character intros are exactly the same as the ones that we saw updated on the Chinese website a couple weeks ago. But with the exception that the Barbarian had that model update, and because the Crusader and the Necromancer were not playable in the demo, we hadn't seen those, and so I imagine that those ones from the Chinese website are similar, and that those are actually kind of like maybe the final render for what those little class intros would be. But it is cool to go through and see that. I wish that we had an update on the North American site to see it, because there were some changes. Like the Necromancer looks a little bit more like a pop star than a rock star, and something that's just kind of is a trope nowadays, where the skeletons that he summons are are skinned and have flesh. There's a lot of cultural regulations that involve with getting a license to sell a game in China, and even though skeletons themselves are not actually banned in China, despite the common misinformation that's out there about it. Developers usually just go ahead and take that extra step, so that way they don't, skirt the regulations, because the regulations themselves are very vague. It's kind of just up to the Ministry of Cultures has the final say on whether they approve it or not. But I believe the actual wording of the rule is things that are not detrimental, to the culture of or the sensibilities of the people of China, and that is something that is you can take many different ways. And there are games that exist with skeletons. They're not banned, but a lot of Western developers we're not taking chances. We're just going to completely remove the skeletons. I think one of the most famous ones is the World of Warcraft Merogar from Icecrown Citadel, a giant chimera bone angel that they turned into a hideous amalgamation of flesh and heads in the Chinese version. But it seems that they're doing something similar here with Immortal. And again, is that one I can kind of see is probably a regional take, but we'll also have to wait and see if if there's going to be the options to have different skins, to customize your character, your face options and such. It's a big proponent that they're showcasing for Diablo 4. It's not something that they've talked about in Immortal yet, but it's an important aspect to most RPG games, is that level of character customization. Being able to go through, create, and kind of better own your character. And I would, even though you're not really going to see your character that much in an isometric, view of an ARPG, just the fact that you have the ability to do so is something that would be a welcome change. D3 was big with just being able to, pick your gender, with Diablo 4 actually having the full range of character customization options is definitely a step in the right direction, and I hope to see those things also exist in Diablo Immortal. And that came, I believe it was the Thursday, so it was the day right after I recorded episode 193, and it was the day before China Joy, which is a really big video games convention over in China. I think it's one of the biggest in the country. Blizzard and NetEase had some presentations, but they didn't talk about or even mention Diablo Immortal. And so the updates and the gameplay trailers and stuff that you've seen over the last couple of weeks, some people might have said that they were from China Joy. They're not. And it's something, a question that I see a lot on Reddit, various discords and such, where people are asking for, well, what else did they talk about at China Joy? We got the gameplay trailer, but what'd they say at the panel? And that really just comes down to people marketing the update as something that it wasn't. And so that changes people's expectations of what it is. And so that kind of goes through with, managing expectations is one of the hardest things that we as Diablo fans can possibly do. We hype ourselves to the extreme. So when someone goes through and reports something as, being an update from a convention, obviously the next question is, well, what other information did they announce? There wasn't anything, because they didn't talk about it at China Joy. They just updated the Chinese website. That was it. But then the next week we had the Activision Q2 earnings call, where they went and talked a little bit about Immortal and some of the other franchises over at Blizzard. And one of the biggest takeaways from that is during the 2019 Q4 earnings call and the 2020 Q1 earnings call, they had both mentioned that regional testing for Diablo Immortal would be taking place mid-year. Well, we're kind of at the end of mid-year, and we were hoping to learn something more from the earnings call, and we did. Wasn't quite what we wanted to hear, but at least was a little bit more additional information. The verbiage had changed from regional testing to internal testing, and so they said that they were within the next coming weeks that they would begin expanded internal testing at Blizzard and kind of left it at that. But then later in the Q&A section, they one of the people had asked for a little bit more information on that. Had the regional testing plans changed? What was their original timeline for it? They kind of sidestepped the question about directly answering the question about regional testing, and just focused in on what the internal testing means, and that they kind of talked about, this was J. Allen Brack that was answering the question, the president of Blizzard, was saying that that this is a big milestone when they've actually branched the game out to the entirety of the company, all of their offices and such, to test the game, because they have a very wide variety of players, from the casual to the super hardcore, to get a whole bunch of different takes at the game, pull in all of that feedback, and then be able to implement some changes to it before they get ready for a more public facing for testing of the game. And so that at least it's a step that's moving forward. It's getting ready, to actually go out there. Whether Blizzard does actually implement a regional testing, because of how they kind of sidestep the question about a timeline for regional testing, makes me wonder if it's one of those ones that's just going to go straight to print. That they'll do that internal testing. Maybe we'll see some sort of fan summit or something like that they've done for their other franchises in the past. To get some feedback, from other maybe hardcore Diablo players, people from the mobile games side of content creation and such. We're not exactly sure, but immediately following the conference call, they did go through and publish an update. And so Wyatt Cheng, who's the lead designer for Diablo Immortal, went and posted the 2020 mid-year update for Diablo Immortal. They showed off some interesting little screenshots and such. Even though this doesn't want to load properly. There we go. What the hell is this monstrosity? That's just nasty. That right there is going to give me nightmares. And then as I'm going through and rereading the Sin War, is that a Stroga? Can't be. He's locked away in the moon of the spider, right? Maybe. But we saw, a whole bunch of little images and such. We got, like another little tidbit that, they talked about this in the announcement, that we'll be going into more Lost Archives of Zoltan Kulle and fighting potentially a simulacrum of Zoltan Kulle, as well as just some little gameplay. The graphics that we're seeing here are closer to what we saw in the actual the playable demo at 2019. It's always going to have some concessions once you actually go live. You start at a very high concept, and then you kind of have to bring it down in order to fit on different forms of hardware and such. That's kind of like the case in PC. I imagine that's also going to be the case for mobile. I'm not too well informed on that aspect, so I just assume that's what it is. But the game itself still looks beautiful, and we also got some hints at some you have all of them there standing around with kind of like that lava demonic set armor that looks really cool, and I can't wait to learn more or hear more about the game. And the one last final thing that I wanted to go and talk about for Immortal is apparently there is a lot of buzz with one of the updated the gameplay trailers from the Chinese website was Baal, but we already knew that. So and it's actually one of those ones where I wrote an article about it over on Diablo Fans, that Baal is in the original announcement video for Diablo Immortal. That we know that he's there. There's a comment about seeing Baal again in Immortal in the Art of Diablo book that was released at BlizzCon 2019, and you can even see down to the dead cultists and fallen from the original in the updated Chinese. That it's the same clip. In that updated, I'm selling it even more so. That updated gameplay trailer, it's a 2-minute trailer, maybe 15 seconds of new scenes. It's just like little clips that shows off like the new Barbarian, as well as some of the updated character models from the 2018 announcement and the 2019 demo, and then the new 2020 updates that we saw, over, on the Eastern Market website. So those are just some of the things, and like we knew Baal was back, and so I guess I found it strange that some people were making a really big deal that, oh my God, look, they announced Baal in this update, and it's like, well, he's always been there. We always knew that Baal was in the game, so there's there's that. And yeah, that will that pretty much is going to do it for me here this week. Thanks for going through, listening to me rant. I hope that we've got some more to talk about in the next episode. Oh, and one last thing, I almost completely forgot as I pull up my show notes one last time there. We also had an announcement about the Diablo 3 PTR. So one last thing coming in at the end, semi-important news that I probably shouldn't have forgotten, but when they announced that they were implementing the double bounty bags for Season 21, they also said that they are making some changes to the way that they handle the PTR. They're extending it from 1 week out to 2 weeks, but that means that they're also extending out the length of the season to compensate for it. So it sounds like we're going to have a slightly longer PTR, and at least that will have an updated build, because the way that they've done it in the last couple of seasons is that they did 1 week, they put out the PTR, we give feedback, they implement changes, we don't see those changes until the patch goes live, and then we have the 2 weeks between the patch and the new season for them to implement any other changes or problems that we might have seen. Kind of baking all of that into the PTR itself is kind of the point of the PTR, and like what I mentioned a couple episodes ago with the state of Diablo 3, it is a skeleton crew that's going and working on the time, and so they have some pretty strict deadlines. So when they have to go back and work on fixes with the prior or the current seasonal theme, that's reducing the amount of time that they're working on the next patch in the next season. And so, instead of just starting the PTR a little bit early, extending it out a little bit also just gives them additional time, so that way they can, meet their deadlines, meet their time goals, and such, for developing content. And, hopefully this means that we'll get, we'll have, a more streamlined PTR process. We'll be able to give feedback on the changes that they make to the sets. We'll be able to hopefully identify potential issues or exploits, earlier in the cycle before we get into the season. And also hopefully we'll get some buffs to the wizard, because they really need it and nobody uses the Typhon set. So, there's some of those things. Yeah, that will pretty much do it for me for this episode. I thank you all for going through, sticking with me here tonight. I just want to say it'll probably be another 2 weeks. So that's going to be August 26th. Will be the next episode for episode 195. I don't think that we're going to be seeing anything about the PTR, at least until we're into September. And yeah, we'll just wait and see what we've got to go through, talk about. I'll finish the Diablo novel, so I can always talk more lore at that point, if that's something that you all would like. But please, if you have any questions for the show, you have any comments or feedback for me, just drop me a line, westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter @the WM Workshop, or you can even follow my personal account over at 9ballgamer on Twitter. And of course, you can follow the show here every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/BlizzPro, or check it out. The show is on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, your podcasting platform of choice. I don't even know everything that JR has the show on anymore, but there's like half a dozen at least out there. If you like listening to podcasts, yeah, the show is probably out there over on those. Yeah, with that, that brings me to an end, and I will catch you all next time.